Thank you, Tom, for that very wonderful introduction. I'm passionate about dyslexia, and you're going to get that from my talk today. It's come for over the last 15 years of working with dyslexics, and what I want to share with you today is my knowledge, which has come from experience. And this is a slide that Tom really wanted me to put up because he heard me say these words: I want to put you into the shoes of the learner. And he said, Gail, you've got to have a slide with that on it. It's really important. And sometimes as teachers, we need to allow ourselves to do that, to be in the shoes of the learner. It's really important. I've tried really hard over my teaching career to actually do that. And I know that you've all come, from a hard-working day today at school. I want you just to sit back and relax. I'm going to show you a little video clip to begin with. All right? You can let all the worries of that teaching day flow out of your head and have a look at this wonderful father and his son, and then I'll talk to you about what it all means.
I got 4 children. I got 3 girls, and they all could read. Went through school pretty easy. Mm-hmm. Mitchell just couldn't read. It was basic things he couldn't read. Mm-hmm. A golden book. Right. He was 11 years old and he still couldn't read a golden book. The basic words, the is, there, that, because, he just couldn't read. The teacher hated having interviews with us because he said nothing's changed, and I said be honest, and he'd say nothing's changed. The school had been doing 3 times a week extra reading, remedial reading, so you get pulled out of class and one-on-one. The school had done lots. We still couldn't read, and the teachers were nice, and they'd pull him out, and Mitchell was happy, and he's a good kid, helps with cleaning up. The teachers give him merit awards every day because he's such a good kid, but his goodness doesn't flow through to his reading. Look, he needs to be able to read a sign: danger, do not enter electricity cables, or something like that. Right. They were trying to help him, but the school didn't know what to do to help him. We had him sight test done twice. We took him to the Royal Blind Society and they done a hearing test on him. And everything come back fine. We had extra tuition before we started everything else. That still wasn't working. Right. We would sit and try to read with him, but that was just frustrating. And I've got a bit of patience, but when you read the word "the" 50 times in the book, and we get to the last page and he doesn't know what it is, it's just, The teacher said, I think Mitchell might have dyslexia. We raced home from that parent and teacher night and typed in dyslexia and had a little quiz, and we done that, and Mitchell was a candidate. As soon as we found out it was dyslexia, we rang you and you spoke to us on the internet and spoke to us on mobile phone the next day. And my words to you were, you must be in our house, because that's what it felt like. You told me who Mitchell was, and I only said his name. Mitchell is excellent. we sit down every day. We do our homework. We read every day. If I don't read, he reads with Mum. And Mitchell, from a golden book at 11 years old, we couldn't read. We're now reading year 5 books confidently.
Well done.
I'm very happy. We were saying where he was. I explained about the book, we couldn't read. It was that bad, we couldn't read golden books. And then she mentioned the cost. And I said, look, it is dear. But I said, if someone come to me now and said it's going to cost $5,000, I'd still happy to pay $5,000. That's fantastic. This is my son Mitchell, and I'm really, really proud of him.
Just close your eyes for a little minute. Think of the Mitchells in your classroom. Can you see them? Open your eyes. And put your hand up if you know you've got at least one Mitchell in your classroom. And for me, it was absolutely profound because mine wasn't Mitchell, it was Cassie, my daughter. Teachers are supposed to have all the answers. I thought I did. In my training, I was sure that I knew what I could do with all children to teach them how to read. And when my twins went to school, now I have an older daughter who is also dyslexic, but I sent her to school at 4.5. I just thought she was too young all the way through. And they said, don't repeat her. Now, by the time I sent the twins to school, I'd been teaching for a really long time. Of my 4 children, I really felt Cassie was the most innately clever. She just had a way with people. She had a way with getting to places. Her memory was incredible for remembering events, places, people. And she took a little brother, you know, under a wing, and off they went to school together. He cried and she said, oh, you'll be okay. And we got to the end of kindergarten and the beautiful young first year out teacher said, oh, Gail, I think we need Cassie to be in the K1 for next year because she hasn't got a sound. She can't do a phonics. And I said, well, you're not really telling me anything I don't know because I'd already been working at home with her. And I knew she didn't have a phonics. And I really couldn't work out why. We spent lots of extra time and it just didn't make sense. Now, maths, brilliant. She was brilliant at maths, really creative, had absolutely no issues in anything other than spelling, reading. Sight words were a big issue for her and so were the phonics. So I worked and we worked and we worked and we did lots of work on the sight words and we did lots of work on the phonics. But it just didn't work for her. So I was on a journey constantly for all of her primary school years. And what happened with Cass was, you know, the more effort I put into it, you know, speech pathology, eye testing, we did absolutely everything. Each special needs teacher that I had diagnosed her with something else. We found it, and we did something to address that. And we never really got to the bottom of it. The closest we got was Erlen lenses. And Erlen lenses were great for Cassie because she had migraine headaches when she was 7. And so the Erlen lenses got rid of her migraine headaches. So for me, I will always put my hand up for Erlen because that was enough for me that the Erlen were effective. But my special needs teacher and I, we had a great boss actually who had dyslexic kids, so he just sort of let us do whatever we wanted to do. And we had 20% of our school in Erlen lenses. And what did I learn from that? That Erlen, fantastic for some, they worked for some kids, that was enough. But what happened for Cass was, yes, it got rid of glare sensitivity, and she wasn't clumsy anymore, the depth perception was dealt with, and she didn't have migraine headaches, but she still had issues with phonics, and she still had issues with the sight words. She just didn't get it. Now, it took me till she was in high school, and I got another special needs teacher, and that was when I was the assistant principal. And I said to the boss, well, we're going off to America. I found this, we read the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, and I said, we're going to America, this is it. I found it, this is it. And I was doing a check-off list and it was great for Cassie. She's going, yes, that's me, that's me. So I went to America and I came back with 2 things. Something that I could implement in my classroom, which was fantastic, and I'll talk to you about the teacher workshop later. That was really fantastic, and I did implement it throughout the whole school. So much so that when I walked into Friday afternoon assembly and there were 276 children, I could simply do this, and after a minute there would be total silence. I taught the kids how to self-regulate, and it was brilliant. So the how to learn strategies are absolutely fantastic. So that was one side of it, and the other side was I learnt what Cassie needed, and she needed a full-on correction program. So that's what I got for Cassie. And it turned her life around. She went from having no self-confidence and very low self-esteem to realising her gift. She was just, it turned her life around. And all those years that I've been looking for things, it was the most profound thing that I found that worked for her. Now, we all look for things, and we all know as teachers that some some things work for some kids and some things work for others. And would I say to you to throw out phonics out of your classroom? Absolutely not. If I had kindergarten today, I would still teach phonics. Phonics is an explicit teaching program that you need for about 70% of the kids in your class to teach them how to read. Whole language was brilliant. We went through, I think some of my children went through the stage of whole language where they didn't learn any grammar in whole language. And Mem Fox's idea about immersing children in literacy is beautiful. And I certainly did that with my children. And for some of them, they picked up with that, and some they didn't. It wasn't enough. And what I found with that teaching program was the missing piece to the puzzle. So that was really important in terms of addressing all the needs. But for Cassie, it was profound in her development. She is an interior architect. She did very well in her HSC. She got honours at university in her architecture program, and she has designed and built my new home office in Sydney, and it's brilliant. I let her have absolutely free rein on it, which I don't do very often or very well, giving someone free rein, but she created exactly what she knew what I wanted because she could picture that, absolutely picture it. So it turned her life around. So for me, that was the beginning of my journey. For all those years I'd been looking, and then I found the answer because that whole thing about, people would say to me, you're a teacher. How come you can't work with your own child and find what she needs? And I didn't know. I couldn't do it. I'd had in my first part of my teaching career in Newcastle, I worked at the demonstration school and I worked with very experienced teachers. I'm sure that my demonstration lessons were the ones that this is how you don't do it in my second year out of teaching, but anyway, it was fine. I learnt a lot from those teachers, but I didn't learn about dyslexia and I didn't know how to deal with my own daughter. And let me just go on to the next slide. It's genetic. It is. What I learnt was, coming back from America, I showed this DVD to my husband Peter, and I said to him, God, you've got to have a look at this. This is how dyslexic people see things. It's really amazing. And it was a picture of a tree. Well, it wasn't just a picture. It was a three-dimensional model of a tree. It was showing how the dyslexic person sees things in 3 dimension, how they visualise. So it was showing the tree from the top, the bottom, the back, the front, the roots. And he said to me, well, so what's so good about that? I said, is that how you see things? He said, of course I do. How do you think I make buildings stand up? Pete was advised we went to years 11 and 12 together in Newcastle, and he was advised by the school counsellor in year 10 to leave school and get a trade, mate, you won't make university. You won't be able to do it. And his father said, oh, wake up to yourself, of course you're going to school. Now, when he had to do the matric exam in Sydney to get him into uni, and then they said to him, oh, you can't do engineering, that'll be too hard. No way, do architecture. So he did 2 degrees in architecture, electives in engineering, went straight into engineering, lectured in architecture whilst he did engineering. So he was 2 degrees in architecture, 1 degree in engineering, an IT expert, had his builder's licence, could just about do anything. An incredibly clever man. Now, I'm not saying getting a trade is a bad thing. Tradesmen these days earn a lot more than teachers. We probably all know that. But the thing is, he was advised because somebody had assessed him and said, no, you can't do it. Now, I
had the same experience at 14.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of people like that. We assume, I can't, I had a young teacher tell me that, look, your children can't all be as clever as you. They're not. I said, I know that, but I know about innate intelligence as well. And when in my assessment even, when you assess a child and you know that they can be really up here in one level and then really down here in another, there's got to be something there. We know that if their IQ is borderline, if you want to call it that, then okay, you're looking at a different set of strategies or set of norms. But when you're getting that reading where they're really high in one area and maybe low in 3, or where they're really high in 3 and maybe low in 1, then you've got to look at that and say, well, there's something happening there, and that was my daughter. And certainly that, I remember Pete telling me that he went to a speed reading course, and the teacher said to him, listen, mate, sorry, you're the only one who's ever failed my speed reading course, don't come back. Your reading rate's lower now than when you came. Now, that speed reading course was supposed to help him. I also learnt then about my eldest daughter. Now, as I said, she was a May birthday. I was very young when I had her and very inexperienced about teaching and when you send children to school. I sent her when she was 4.5. Big mistake. My grandsons, my twin grandsons in New Zealand, turned 5 in February, and they're not going to school till next year. Right? They're boys and they were born early. Now, all the way through her school, she was at school with me. My children went to primary school with me, and I taught some of them. Now, she just, she was okay. She was always above average, but she just never really excelled. And I just kept thinking, well, she's young and that's why. But, she's an artist. She's presenting at the Biennale in Lawn. She did it a year and a half ago, and she's doing it again in March. And she has an exhibition on autism because she has a child on the autistic spectrum. Now, she's also a visual arts teacher, so she's dyslexic. So my husband, eldest daughter, 2 in the middle, second daughter and the twin son are not dyslexic. I'm not dyslexic. My husband was. So that's half the family. Half the family are dyslexic. And I've also got 1 out of the 7 plus 2 grandchildren has been diagnosed with dyslexia and has done a correction program. So it is genetic. It is there. And I feel very, very, very strongly about that it certainly is. So, what does dyslexia mean? This is my definition that I've come to believe is very true. Dyslexia is a difference. That's how I see dyslexia. People who are dyslexic think differently. They think 3-dimensionally in pictures. So if they are thinking like that, they need to learn differently. If you think differently, you need to learn differently. I feel very, very strongly about that. Look, we know that there are lots of definitions for dyslexia. It's been bandied around for years. I have to tell you this story. I went to a talk recently that was organised by Spelled New South Wales in Sydney. Marianne and I went along. It was called Debate on Dyslexia. And I did the wicked thing of not reading really what it was about. I went, debate on dyslexia? Yes! Got all dressed up, was ready to roll, paid $65. And Professor Julian Elliott, who'd come out from the UK, presented his book, which was called The Debate on Dyslexia. And his view on dyslexia was that it didn't exist at all. So his opinion was very white and mine was very black, and I thought there's no point in even arguing with the guy. He just said, look, it's a reading disorder, that's the genetic thing. They can't decode, that's what it is. And he talked about in the UK where they have tiers. What happens is you have a class, any with problems go into tier 1. We work individually with those kids or in little groups. Some come back to the class and some go to tier 2. They get more intensified instruction in tier 2 and eventually they get to go back to the class. But hang on, there are a few who get left in tier 3 and he didn't have anything to do with tier 3 kids. Nothing. And I thought, well, they're probably your dyslexic kids who don't get the phonics side of things. You know, if you do phonics until year 3 and kids don't get it and you're at it and at it and at it and you're teaching them how to decode phonetically and they don't get it by year 3, they're not going to get it. They won't. And they need to decode differently. And I'll talk to you about that later. Very, very important. So, we're going to do a little exercise. And when I use the word imagine, you can picture, if you want to, picture or imagine, okay? So I want you to close your eyes, everybody. And I want you to imagine an elephant. Open. Put your hand up if your elephant was pink. No pink ones. Didn't have any pink ones in Coffs Harbour either. Grey. Hands down. Big. Tusk. Tail. Did anyone not have an elephant? Okay, close your eyes again. And I want you to picture home. Open. Inside, hands up. Hands down, outside. Now, did anyone have both? Did anyone have both? Yep, okay, good. Close your eyes, everyone. And picture, it's probably not a good one to do, but I'm going to do it anyway, school. Open your eyes. Inside. Outside. Both. Good, okay. Close your eyes, everybody. And picture a pile of books. Open. Hardcover. Soft cover. Both. Okay, good, thank you. Close your eyes, everyone, and picture a pencil. Open. Lead. Most teachers do lead. Did anybody have colour? Okay, good, thank you. Close your eyes, everybody, and picture the. Open your eyes. Put your hand up if you saw THE. Hands down. Put your hand up if you had a blank. No one had a blank? We could all see THE?
I saw with, because I like to put an E on with. I see the with. WITHE.
Okay, good. All right.
Always put an E on with.
Okay, and you know what? That's exactly what happens. Dyslexic kids see those words. It's the reason my Cassie had the same home reader for 2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks in a row, because she couldn't get the. It was they, these, those, and it was the only. She remembers it really clearly. Let me tell you, really clear. I remember, Mum, when you shouted at me. It was like, oh. How come you can't get the? We've done it for 2 weeks in a row. It was so frustrating. Now, it was frustrating for me. It must have been hellish frustrating for her. Close your eyes, everybody, and picture and. Open. AND. Did anyone have anything different? What did you have?
Hand.
You had?
I have a hand.
You had a hand. A hand. Is that because the and's in it? Right, okay, good. So you've got a picture of hand, haven't you? Right? Do you have a picture of and?
No.
See, what I did then, I've taken you from non-verbal, so picture thinking, to verbal. All those lovely things, the elephant, the home, the school, we saw all of those, and I've taken you on that step. Let me just make sure we've got it. So, the verbal was elephant, the word. The non-verbal was the picture. Now, dyslexics are the non-verbal thinkers. They don't think with words. They don't think about those 217 basic sight words that we say, they're your sight words, you just need to know them, you can't sound them out, you can't do can you? You need to know it's the. Now, if you're a picture thinker, you can't do that. Let's have a look at the two thinking styles. So let's do verbal thought. We'll do that first. It's word thinking. Thoughts are in words. Linear in time, two-dimensional. The speed of thought for word thinkers is 5 words per second. It's sequential reasoning. Verbal thinkers acquire reading and writing skills easily. They do. Their strengths lie in language-based skills. And that's what we tend to teach. That's what we expect them all to be. And yet, we all start off as picture thinkers. We all start off there. We recognise our mum's face. We're very much picture thinkers before we come to school. Let's have a look at the non-verbal thought, the picture thinker. Their thoughts are in images containing multiple senses. And that's really important. I'll talk about perception later and I'll bring the senses into that. They're three-dimensional or multi-dimensional, a bit like the picture of the tree that I showed my husband. Their speed of thought is 24 to 32 pictures per second, and it's subliminal. Quite often I'll get kids in, and when I'm testing them in the assessment, I'll say to them, do you think you're a picture thinker? Oh, no. And we go through the activities, and I can point out each time that they are picture thinkers and they just don't even realise it. Because most of the time, mum might be at home and you might be at school, you need to know those words. You need to know those words. And we discouraged, I discouraged it. Come on, you've got to get on now, we're reading the book. And it's two-dimensional, those words. It's intuitive reasoning. Reading and writing skills are difficult. I'll go through each one of those in a moment and tell you why. Strengths lie in visual spatial skills. Very, very important. Okay, so what happens for the dyslexic child when we try to make them verbal thinkers? All right? They get confused and they go into a state of confusion. So what can happen? We can have a letter. Let's look at the letter recognition first. That one is? What is it now? What is it now? What is it now? That's what they can do. When they get into a state of confusion, because they're doing, oh, God, is it bed? Oh, I don't know, is it Deb? Oh, I don't know which one it is. They go into a state of confusion, and what happens for them is they spin all around like that. So that's just the letter recognition, right? There can be confusion.
I learned it by visualising a cricket bat and a ball.
Well, I used to teach that. You know, when you're writing it first, when you do a D, the cricket bat, the bat, and then the ball, and then the drum, and then the stick for the D. Okay, I'm sure we all went through those procedures. We give clues like that. But, you know, we're still working in two-dimension, and the dyslexic child doesn't get that. Let me do, I want to go to this again, to the 3 parts to a word. All right, so we've talked about the letter confusion. Now we're going to have a look at the word confusion. Now there are 3 parts to a word. What it looks like. E-L-E-P-H-A-N-T. What it sounds like. Elephant. What it means is the picture. Now, if we're doing a word like elephant, like you did when I asked you to do that exercise, it was easy because we all know what an elephant looks like. But what do you do for a word like the? And what do you do for the there's and the were and the where and the was and the saw? Why does a child get was and saw mixed up? Why do they? Have they got a picture for was? No. So they turn it into saw. Why might they turn it into saw?
Because you can see something that's marked as visual. It's just sort of visual.
Sort of visual? Think of another, a picture word of saw.
Oh, like a saw.
Yeah, a saw. Okay, they're looking for a picture. They're looking for pictures all the time. So turn it into saw. Does that make sense?
It's also something you do, because I've seen kids turning the into they quite a lot.
Oh, of course, because they're looking for something that has meaning for them, and it sent them into a state of confusion. That was Cassie, 2 weeks in a row, that little home reader, and it was the. And she always had problems with they, T-H-A-Y. I just flipping back to the letter. Let's take the letter Y. What does Y normally say? Y, as in yes or yacht. How about in baby? How about in cry? How about in say?
I put it down as one of my vowels.
You put it down as one of your vowels, so it's a vowel sound.
Yeah.
Is it a vowel though?
No.
No, technically, if we're doing vowels and consonant, it's not really a vowel. It is a ring-in if we're talking sounds, okay? Now, if you're talking to the dyslexic child and you want to give them certainty, then they need to know that Y is Y. Okay, they need that certainty. Now I just want you to have a look at the screen for me. I'm just going to show it very quickly. Can everyone see it with me out the way? What does that say?
It's time to go to school.
It's time to go to school. Certain? Really certain? Yep. Okay. Now you assumed that it would be, it's time to go to school, because who would put 2 2s in there? Okay, you assumed that, right? So, and dyslexic children need certainty. When I get to talk to you about the teacher workshop, one of the things that we can give them is certainty in their reading. They get confused. And with little words like to in particular, right? Can you think of, I'm going to tell you the meaning of to, T-O, is in the direction of. Can you think of a picture for that? An arrow. Yes, it's an easy one to do. And you can put a person going to the shop or whatever in the direction of. Do you see how easy it is to visualise that? Now, that's the sort of thing that the dyslexic child needs. And you're thinking, God, 217 basic sight words, that's a lot to get through. But you know, once you get going with them and they actually work through them, and you can start at kindergarten level and you can work your way through and they can do the sight words they need to do, it's actually a really good teaching way. And you don't just have to do it with your dyslexic kids. What I found with this program is that you can actually work with all the kids in the classroom. The first year I came back from America, I had a K1, and those kindergarten kids were the cleverest kids that I've ever worked with. And I used this multi-sensory hands-on program in the classroom. Did I chuck anything out? No, definitely not. In my literacy groups, I made sure that I just had another table, and that's where the kids made their clay letters. And then when they'd made all their clay letters, we started doing their words. So I was bringing it in, so it was an effective way in the classroom of working with an existing curriculum, throwing nothing else out, just bringing in the missing piece to the puzzle for those kids that needed it.
Can I ask?
Yes?
How do you teach the difference between TO and TOO?
Well, what is TOO?
I never know how to use them.
As well, yeah, more than, as well as, okay? I ate too much food for lunch. What can you visualise for that?
Lots of food.
Yeah, okay? And what would you do with TWO?
Number, not the numeral.
Well, you do the numeral, but what else would you do with it? Because the numeral's a symbol. Two things. Okay? For the dyslexic child, remember they need that three-dimensional picture. That's really important. Really important. Oh, I know. This is my fave. Got to write this one for you. Now, don't read it yet, okay?
Yeah, right.
Okay, everybody read that to me, please.
Woman without her man is nothing.
There's no punctuation, is there?
No punctuation at all.
All right.
Punctuation is golden.
Read it to me now. Woman without her man is nothing. Okay? Now read it to me. Woman without her man is nothing. Do you see how I changed the meaning of that totally? By punctuation. Punctuation is really, really important. And for dyslexic kids, hey, it's another symbol. What's it mean? Not really sure. Work it out. Teach them how to do it. It's really important when they're reading that not only do they know the symbols and the words, but they also need to know the punctuation symbols. Really, really important for effective reading. All right. So, all right, let me have a look at, yes, I should have put the punctuation one up. Yep, okay, sorry, got behind with the slides. Now, what I was doing there was trying to show you what it's like for a dyslexic child, all right? Their perception becomes skewed. They go into a state of confusion when they see a symbol or a word that they can't picture, right? So their perception is skewed. And when we're talking about perception, it can be what they see, what they hear, what they feel, what they smell. You know, some child in your classroom might think, oh, I've got a teacher and her voice is really loud. And they go home to mum and say, their voice is really loud. And your voice might not be really loud, but they might be really sensitive to sound. So it's not just what they see, it's all of their senses all together. So their perception is what becomes skewed. In the teaching program that I'll talk to you about, what you can do with them is give them the self-regulation skills. I call them the how to learn, and it's simply breathing, focusing, checking energy dial, because energy dial is important. You know your ADHD kids. Give them an energy dial and life becomes really different. They're the skills that come out of the teaching program that you can work with all kids. They don't have to be dyslexic. I actually was fundamentally affected, or profoundly is the word, affected when I went to America to do this training. I'd never flown any further than New Zealand. So it was huge. Christmas holidays, I'd paid for it. The dollar was worth 50 cents, it cost me a fortune. My husband couldn't really understand why I was going. But anyway, I went with my special needs teacher and I was hopeless. I couldn't even fill the forms out in the way. I was so sick. And I got to America and thought, I'm going to be useless in these courses. And I went into that first course and I got the self-regulation skills, the how to focus. And I'm telling you, it was a profound effect on me. And I'm not dyslexic. I went back to my tennis club. At that stage, Pam, I was playing tennis, not bowls. I went back to my tennis club and they all said to me, oh, you've been to tennis camp. And I said, no, I haven't. And those focusing strategies that I got made me really aware of my environment and my surroundings. And I learned how to self-regulate me. So I looked at that and thought, if this worked on me, and I'm not even dyslexic, I can use this with all the kids. And that's when I went through the whole school in my release from face-to-face and worked with everybody and did the self-regulation skills. And that's why I could walk into assembly and do this. And they knew that I meant to get focused. And it was fantastic because the parents were there as well and they were the only ones talking. And they said, oh, I was always on a journey. Where's she been now? Where has she been? Okay. So when I went to the P&C meeting and said, I need money for clay and cooch balls and all the things that I wanted to implement into my teaching program, they gave it to me. So I was able to implement this in the school. So, you know, it was profound on me, and they are real. It's the how to learn, and it's just so, when you give, you know, when you say to a child, concentrate, and they've got no idea what you mean. We can use the word focus, and there's a physical, visual, feeling thing for them to know what that means. I took them through a process, and they know what it means. So for them, it's absolutely, you know, it's really good because they know what they need to do to get ready for learning. And they have a choice. I had a boy, I went from that K1 to a 5-6. The 5-6 teacher left because the class was so bad. And the boss said, Gail, you're the AP, you've got to change. I had to leave my beautiful little K1 class and go to 5-6. And they all said to me when I walked through the door, where's the clay? Right, they wanted me to bring the clay, you know, with them. And I had a boy in there who had been diagnosed ADHD. He'd done a correction program, right? He was also dyslexic. He'd done a correction program and he said to his mum, I'm not having any medication. I know how to get myself ready, right? I know how to do this. But when I left the class, so, you know, we're in class and I could go, Andrew, or we had a special sign, Andrew. That's all I had to do, Andrew. And he knew, oh, she's reminding me. It was just a visual reminder, that was all. Didn't do anything else. When I left the classroom, when I was off class to do my AP duties, he always came to my office because the teacher, who was beautiful, didn't have the same strategies to work with him and he didn't work as well for her. Now, you look at that and say, well, it was, you know, maybe it was partly me, and perhaps it was. And I would say to him, okay, Andy, this is your choice. I know. I'm going back there and I'm going to get focused. It's all right, I'll get focused, I promise. Well, Andy, it's your choice. I don't want the pills, he said to me. I don't want the pills. I'm going to go back there and I'm going to get focused. So it empowered him. He had self-control of that. And giving that to children we're working with is really important. And it also gives them accurate perception. So for your dyslexic kids who are confused, who need accurate perception, this is fantastic. Working with the clay, whether it's letters, symbols, words, right, putting it all together and making it all work, right, gives them that three-dimensional multi-sensory approach to it and that visualisation, so they can do all of those things. They're creating their own tools to work with. So they had little boxes, coloured lids, so when we did our groups we could just, all the yellow group, the red group, the green group, yep, off you go, get your lids, and off we'd go, and we could swap the lids if they changed groups. You know, if I needed to change them, we swap lids. So that was really important for them because they had their own tools and they created it. Right, so bringing into creation was really important for them. And you know, I can use these words, memorisation versus mastery. The kids that go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P. I don't know how to write that, Mrs. Helena. What's L, M, N, P? And okay, so they create their alphabet, right? That's memorisation when they're doing that, right? And mastery, when they create it themselves, they're bringing in that mastery. They've created it so it's part of them and they visualise it. So that part of it is really, really important for them. Okay. So how will you know in your classroom? I put this question up because I want you to walk away from here with some ideas. I didn't want you to come and just listen to me and think she's trying to sell us something. I wanted you to walk away with some ideas. I think it's really important. I've put a list of things up there, but I'm actually going to, that first activity I did with you, the visualisation. Now, when I first started teaching, we did verbalising and visualising, Nancy somebody or other's book, I can't remember who it was, and where you would sit with the kids and you'd get them to visualise and then verbalise what they'd visualised. Right, that exercise I did with you, right, initially, the imagine, is something you can do in your class. And just like I asked you to put all your hands up and stuff like that, then you can see the kids who go, yeah, no, and they'll tell you all about that elephant and all about the book, and I mean, you do other things. I used to do a cat and that sort of stuff. And when you get to the word like the and, right, and you get into visualise, you'll know whether they're having difficulty with that, okay? The child who doesn't respond to phonics. Okay, I'll do it off this list instead of mine. Okay, and you know, if you've done phonics and you're doing it and doing it and doing it, and here's another little story. A grandma, before her child went to her granddaughter went to school, they used to go to church, and she'd say, "Hey, Nan, that word's church," and Nan would go, "Yes, you beauty." And then she went to school and she said, "Hey, Nan, that's church." No word, it was church. So you've got to look at it and say, you know. And okay, for that little girl, she was probably, you know, not at that readiness stage yet to make it a word, but like she knew the word, and then it was church, and it wasn't a word anymore. It was just a whole group of sounds. And we know that a whole group of sounds make a word, unless it's a nonsense word, but they do. So, you know, it's really important to have a look at the phonics, the child who doesn't get it. And if you've got year 3 and they haven't got phonics by year 3, it's not the teacher's fault. It's not the teacher before who didn't do phonics. It's the child. Right, they're not picking up on the methods of teaching that have gone before. Oh, that Professor Joe Elliott, he said, we need to instruct our teachers better. They're not doing a good enough job. That man took away all hope of every dyslexic person in that room, and I did not sleep that night because I didn't stand up and be the voice of the dyslexic. That's why I'm here, and I want to be the voice of the dyslexic here. I didn't stand up and defend them, but I just thought, you know, we all have different, you're going to walk away from here and think, yeah, her opinion's really different to mine, and that's okay. Right, as a teacher, you need to be sussing things out. But when I listened to him, I thought, he's never going to listen to what I have to say. He's really set in his ways. And I have to say, I was a bit like that. When I went to America and I trained, it was like, God, if that Aussie woman asks one more question, because it was very different to my theories of how children learn. And I really had to open myself to it. And that's all I'm asking you to do today, to open yourself to it. I know you've been sitting there nodding your head thinking, yep, I can think of that child in my classroom, but just open your mind to it. The child who doesn't remember the sight words. Now, I would have the mums come in and they'd say, hey, he's got the 20 sight words. Yes, you beauty. And I'd test, and I didn't test like that, did I? Where the words sat on the page. I just tested all over the place. The child had no idea. That clever child had worked out where it was on the page, and that's what they do when they're reading. Now, we all know the beginning stage of reading is they read the picture. My granddaughter's just gone to school. She's in kindergarten. She's the only granddaughter. All the rest are boys at this stage, although the two I'm getting are a boy and a girl twin, like I've got. But, you know, her father was beside himself. He's an editor, you know, for the newspaper. She's not reading. She's just looking at the picture and making it all up. He said, I'm covering up the picture. And I went, oh my God, do not cover the picture. That's the initial stages of reading, and she needs that. It's really important. They need to, and she just wants to, you know, she wrote on a Magna Doodle in the car, just letters all over. She's finally learned to write letters all over the place. Okay, Nanny, what does that say? I said, well, what would you like it to say? No, what does it say? I said, well, it can say what you want it to say, or it can say what I want it to say. Oh, just read a whole lot of letters. Oh, she said, no, make it up. What's it say? So I made up this wonderful story, of course, and, you know, she thought it was fantastic. Mum gets in the car and she says, Mum, read that. And Mum goes, She went, oh, no, Nanny's much better than you. And so her dad's not allowed to do her home reader anymore, her mother said. That's it, he's not allowed to do it. But she's picked up, and she'll, you know, she will pick up on it, that's fine. Okay, a bright child in other subjects. So, like my Cass, maths, fantastic. Geography, she could do all of those other things, really artistic, musical, all of those things. Literacy, just... So if you've got a child who's really bright in other areas and you talk to them and you know they are, innately you know they're really clever, and yet they're not giving you those results, then be aware, right? If the problem's in literacy, then maybe it is dyslexia. The artistic sports person. A lot of kids who come for an assessment will tell me they're really good at art or they're really good at sport, dance, drama, all of those sorts of things, and yet they're hopeless at spelling and writing and reading. The child who can't focus, the daydreamer, you know, the computer screen child? On remote. They've gone off, and why have they tuned out? They've tuned out because you gave them something that was too hard, or they didn't like what was happening in the classroom, or they were really challenged by it. So it's like, yep, I'll be a computer screen. And they're in their own little world having a lovely time, because in their head, their imagination's fantastic. The pictures they're making in there are far better than what's happening in the classroom. And the child who uses the avoidance strategies. I want to go to the toilet. I really need to go to the toilet. I promise I went at recess, but I really, and they're, you know, standing here with their legs crossed and they really need to go, and you think, God, they're going to wet their pants, I'll have to let them go. They're avoiding. I'll do the message for you, you know, and the other thing is I can still remember this really clearly, doing guided reading groups, okay? So we're in the guided reading group. We're talking 6 kids in a group, and so Johnny's worked out that he's going to be number 4, so he's read ahead. Yeah, that's the sentence I'm going to get, that one. And then Jimmy reads 2 sentences. And he's absolutely stuffed. What's he going to do now? He can't, and he tried, and he's so embarrassed. He can't do it. And he's really tried really hard. So for him, when you see a child like that, when you know, and they do, they try. That was Cassie. She's really a good girl. I know that. I know she's good, but why can't she read? And nobody could give me the answer. So they're the sorts of things to look for. All right. So would you like to know for sure? Now, I taught. I was assistant principal. I went to America and did this training. I got a new principal, and she said, oh dear, what's all that clay? Oh. I thought, okay, time to go. So that's when I started my consultancy, and I was a facilitator then. I facilitated. And all of those things that I'd found with Cassie worked with the kids that I was working with, and it was like, wow. I had goosebumps on my arms every time they could see and say the alphabet forward and backwards. You know, I'd say to a kid when they came in, do you reckon you'll be able to see and say the alphabet forwards and backwards? Oh, no way, Gail, no way. And they do, because I taught them how to visualise, how to use their visual strength. I didn't teach them how to visualise, I encouraged their visual capacity when their perception was accurate and they were able to do it. Really, really important. So, and then, I went back to America and I trained so that I could do the teacher workshop. Okay, I'm a presenter of a teacher workshop, K to 3, strategies to work in the classroom. You know, I've done a lot of workshops in New Zealand, some in Australia. It hasn't taken off as much as it did in New Zealand. They're very much more aware of dyslexia over there. And then I decided that parents and teachers needed to know yes or no. So I then developed my assessment. And the basis of my assessment is the dyslexic screening test. That's the basis. But I use a whole range of other things as well. I do a comprehension. It's an equal Shanker, that's what it's called, and a writing assessment. And what I'm looking for in both of those things is the sight words. The first part of the comprehension is sight words and comprehension, and the second part is just comprehension. And the sight words come up all the time. You know, and when it's just a paragraph of reading and you look at it and there's like 14 errors and they're all sight words, you know, it backs up what I found in the screening test. That's what it does. I can't change the results of the screening test. I can't do that. They're standardised and they're normed. So it's really obvious. But I do the other things so that I get a whole picture. I do dominance tests, I do eye tracking, what else? A linear sequential organisation is looking basically at, you know, seasons, months, years, so that sequence of things. Have they got that? You know, basic concepts of maths, before, after, next, last, between, those sorts of things as well. But when the kids come to me, I don't talk to them dyslexia talk. I talk about different learning styles. Do you think you're a picture? I talk to them about picture thinking and word thinking and a combination of both, which most of us are. And I say, which one do you think you are? And they guess, and they tell me why, and they're comfortable before I even start. I work for about an hour and a half one-on-one with them, and mum sits in, or dad or grandma, who's ever there. Somebody sits in, I want them to see what I'm doing. Now, when we get a result at the end, and on the day I can say yes or no, and I have no's, and there are other things. Once it was just that, you know, they hadn't had a sight test first, their eyes weren't tested and the kid needed glasses. But with the yes, it's mild, moderate or strong. And then if we get that reading, I talk to the kids about dyslexia being a gift. 10% of the population are dyslexic, and the kids walk away from my assessment with their head held high, and they've often had lots of tests done before because mum and dad and the teachers of everyone have tested them. But we get a definitive yes or no, and that's really important. And I felt that was really important for mum and dad, for the child, most importantly, and for you, the teacher, because then you know. Now, I write a full report analysing all the data I've taken, and I make school recommendations. Now I did it from a teacher's point of view. I sat down and said, as a teacher, what would I want to know from this? I would want to know how to make the learning environment conducive to that, for that child to reach their full potential. So they're really simple measures about what you need to do in the classroom. And then the parent recommendation is to do a multisensory non-phonics program. But you know, would they need that if you had the teacher workshop? Maybe not. Maybe yes, if they're older. Yeah, I think it's important for them to do a correction program. They're always going to be dyslexic, but they'll be a corrected dyslexic. Yes?
How old are the children when you first have intervention? The youngest child you ever worked with?
That I've worked with or that I've assessed?
You assessed.
6'2". Is that this one? Yep, there it is. Okay, so 3 to 6, I won't assess, and particularly if they're boys. Won't do them. I say no. They might not be developmentally ready. And you know, you all know that kids come to school, depending on whether they're boys or girls or what age they come in, you know, in your kindergarten range, you can have a 4.5-year-old and a 6-year-old, right? So you've got a big range. If they're not developmentally ready, there's no point in me doing an assessment and saying I think they might be dyslexic. If they've gone into year 1, okay, and with boys I like them to have kindergarten and year 1 under their belt before I assess to make sure, okay? And so I do the junior test, all right? There's a junior test and a senior test. I discussed I've been through all those things with you. The analysis of all testing data summary, recommendations to classroom teacher to create a conducive learning environment, recommendations to parents for dyslexia correction. The difference with the senior one, and it starts at, is it designed just for high school? No, it starts at 11.6. So the junior goes to 11.5 and the senior starts at 11.6. There's a difference in the high school one in that the tests, they're higher order thinking skills. So for instance, when you're doing a phonics, you know, it's called phonemic segmentation. You do that in both. Then you go on to rhyme in the junior and you look at rhyme. But in the senior, you do spoonerisms. And I can't tell you how many teenage boys have said to me, God, Gail, you've done my head in. I can't do that. And it's, you know, it is really, really difficult for them. And some of them get the skill, right? So they might have done a program that's, you know, they've just done and they've got the skill, but then you go down to the nonsense reading passage and they can't put that skill into practice in a nonsense reading passage. Right, they're trying to take meaning from it, they can't. And what happens to them there as well is in the nonsense reading passage is it's full of basic sight words as well, and they really stumble on all of those because that word that isn't a real word really threw them into a spin anyway. So they're spun out, and they not only do they get the nonsense words wrong, but they also get the sight words wrong. So there's a different, and the last test on the junior is, there's a whole series of pictures, and the child has to, I say the word, the child points to the picture. In the senior test, right, it's sequencing. It's called non-verbal reasoning, so it's much higher order, and they've actually got to find that, you know, the next one in the sequence, or, you know, A is to B, a C is to D, those sorts of things. So it's much higher order thinking, and that's basically the difference. You know, obviously when I'm doing the comprehension and the writing assessment, then I'm looking at a different age range, and these are all normed, right, according to age. They're normed. So, you know, they're going to get a reading and it compares them to, you know, to children of their age. In the comprehension, it's year. So it's, you know, it's kindy through to, I think I've got up to year 9 with that. I haven't wanted to do adult. You know, when I took this up, it was simply for the purpose of, as a teacher, being able to say, to make recommendations to other teachers. This is what you can do to help this child. And so I wanted to write that report. But I've had, particularly in Coffs Harbour and here, and in Sydney as well, many people ring me as adults and say, can you test adults? So I am going to take that on board as well. I will test adults. Obviously, you know, that's a different, I mean, it is actually a very similar test. But, you know, the purpose in the report was to help you. You know, that was the idea of it. So, you know, for me, that was a different scenario. But I am going to take adults on as well.
Can I just ask, are your adult assessments and or teenage assessments suitable for disability provisions? Do they meet requirements
Yes.
at university as well as?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Definitely. I've just filled out a couple for, one was a boy that I actually worked with. I did his correction program when he was 9 and he's HSC now, so I've just done his provisions. I've retested him as well. Okay. And would you like to know more? Well, that's the workshop, the missing piece to the puzzle. That is designed for teachers K to 3. It's designed as that multisensory program that you can put in. You know, if you're working with kids with learning disabilities, you know, is there an age on that? This is one of the big discussions that I had with the people in America. You know, if it's not K to 3, you can't do it. And I said, if you've got a child who is working at year 2 level, then you can do it. And I had a big argument about that. And so there is a part in it for special needs. You know, you look at curriculums at the end of the workshop and implementing this into your classroom and making it work. You know, we actually spend time doing that. It's a 2-day workshop. Okay. This is in the workshop. You get a set of classroom strategies with a visual kinesthetic approach, which will complement your curriculum. An effective and efficient reading program for all children aged 5 to 8. Focusing strategies that encourage self-management and individual learning, and a lifelong method of learning. These are famous quotes that I just love. Michael J. Fox. If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. And this little one that my daughter found and is on my business card, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it is stupid. Okay? And that's dyslexia in a nutshell. Now, I actually have another little video that I want you to watch on famous dyslexics. And this is, again, it's relevant to me because of Tom, Mary Ann's son. He devised this one day on his way home from work. Is that right, Tom? Yep. On the train. This is what he came up with.
There is a house built out of stone, wooden floors, walls, and window sills. Tables and chairs warmed by all of the dust. This is a place where I don't feel alone. This is a place where I feel at home. Built a home for you, for me, until you disappear. For me, from you. It's time to live and time to die. Out in the garden where we planted the seeds, there is a tree as old as me. Branches were sold by the color of green. Ground had a rose then past its knees. By the cracks of her skin I climbed to the top. I climbed the tree to see the world. When the gods came around to blow me down, held on as tightly as you held on me. Held on as tightly as you held on me.
People have looked at the TERT protein, which is the easiest to follow.
The gift of dyslexia in that instance for me.
Were you just terrible at school? I was dyslexic. I was quite overwhelmed.
Certainly at the time I had no intention.
Story for a long time.
This I will say, without a doubt.
Soulmates. To be so controversial.
It was a very long time ago. When I was 6, they found that I couldn't read at all, and so I was diagnosed with dyslexia.
I think that's the only way that's been limiting.
I didn't recognise dyslexia.
I've been dyslexic for my entire life.
I got a lot of help. Really good job.
A golden book.
Right.
He was 11 years old and he still couldn't read a golden book.
Right.
And the basic words, the is, there, that, because. He just couldn't read.
Right.
We're now reading year 5 books confidently.
Well done.
Like, yeah, I'm very happy. This is my son Mitchell, and I'm really, really proud of him.
Well, I am going to hold a workshop in Sydney in April next year in October, but if I had 10 teachers in Port Macquarie, I would come here and do one here.
Only 10?
Yeah, I'd do it for 10. I'd come for 10.
Wow.
Okay.
You get the program with that?
Do you get a kit that you can take into your classroom and teach from? Yep. Yep.
And how much is the...
The teacher workshop is $600. It's a two-day teacher. I did it as a 3 for a while because I wanted more time. They're 2 long days, let me tell you. They're 8:30 till 4:30, and there's half an hour of discussion at the end of the day. And the reason I changed, and you know, it was really not what I wanted to do, because when you come to that workshop, you'll be in the shoes of the learner. You are going to experience being the breathing technique, being focused, you know, you do all the clay work, all of those sorts of things that I've taught you about. You are going to do that. You do it with each other. You're going to do it with me. You do it with each other. So you go into your classroom and you know what you're doing. The reason I had to change it from 3 to 2 was the cost to the school. Right, so it isn't the cost of coming to the program, right? I found teachers who were great, wanted to come in the holidays. I'm going over to New Zealand to do one in January in the holidays. But the thing is, the cost to your principal was, well, you know, I've got to release teachers for 3 days. You know, if we're looking at $350 a day, that's a hell of a lot of money. The workshop isn't $600; it's actually $350. So you know, it was $1,600. So that is a lot of money. So I mean, I did a couple in Harvey Bay where I did a Friday, Saturday. So the principal paid for 1 day and paid for the program, and you gave up a day of your weekend. You know, so that sort of agreement. But if someone says, hey, we'll offer our school, and you know, that obviously that saves costs for me. I don't have to, you know, hire a venue, and I actually prefer to do the workshop in a school because we're in the school environment. Let's face it, that's where we should be. I prefer to do it there, but I would be prepared. If you can get 10 teachers together, I'll come up and do 10 teachers. Definitely. Okay, I'll hand you over to Tom.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together for Gail Hallinan.
Thank you. And thanks for coming today. Thank you.